Hello, listeners, and welcome to the Downright Upright Show, the place to go to hear out loud and proud what Minnesotans are thinking. And I am your host, Philip Anthony. I'm so happy that you've chosen to join us today, and I hope you're all doing fantabulous. Now, if you listen to my show, Laura, you know fantabulous is fantastic and fabulous put together twice as nice, right?
Right.
So you're feeling even better than fantastic or fabulous. And for the listeners, I have a little bit of laryngitis, so forgive me if I sound like a bass singer today. My super special guest today is the head of new business development and the host of Food Freedom Radio here on AM 950. And her name is Laura Hedlund. Hello, Laura, and thank you for joining us at that Downright Upright Show.
Well, thank you for inviting me, Philip. This is kind of fun to be on this side of the mic for a change. So I'm looking forward to it.
I know. I mean, next month I'm supposed to be on the other side of the mic too, so I'm looking forward to that. Before we talk about your career, which is amazing, would you tell the listeners where you were born, raised, and went to school, and anything else you want to add to that?
So I grew up in northeast Minneapolis, 6 kids in the family. My dad was a truck driver, and he actually drove over 2 million miles and was Minnesota Truck Driver of the Year in 1984.
Look at that.
And my mom stayed home with the 6 kids for most of the time, but she also did some contract work, like she'd count coupons for General Mills. But she always would count him twice, even though she was paid at piecemeal. She'd count him twice, so her accuracy was really up there. So she had that accuracy thing. And one of the things I've shared in the past is when I was growing up, and I don't mind, I was born in '62, so I was growing up in the '70s. But in our house, 6 kids, we had a 4-bedroom house. We had full dental care, full health care. We got 2 vacations every year on basically my dad's truck driver's salary. So we went, did the winter trip to get everything from Hawaii to Mexico, and summer drive trips up, to the Dells and Michigan. And one of the reasons that we were able to have that non-stressful economic life was because of the Minnesota truck drivers strike in 1934. And so the people in the 1930s really had a commitment to making life better for the next generation, and I reaped those rewards. Growing up as a Teamster's daughter, and my mom got a Teamster's pension. So we made that. And one of the
I used to be a Teamster.
Oh, you were? I didn't know that.
Short period of time,
okay.
But I was.
Yeah. So but that was, I just remember, both my dad and mom were, firmly in the, you make the world a better place for your children, and, life is about joy, and petting the dog and taking walks, and and being able to have that lifestyle. And I was one thing I feel very passionate about right now is how that seems to be slipping. And we know the middle class is declining by the numbers, but we also know by the reality that so many people, rents are too high and you can't make the bills, and it's just too darn stressful. And that's silly to live that way.
Yeah, I remember growing up, and I mentioned this on my show previously, that my mom, after my dad died, my mom was able to support me on one secretary salary. Mm-hmm. She had health care, supported me. I went to the dentist on a regular basis. I went to the doctor. But she was one single woman, not a man, a single woman who was able. This is the 60s, of course, I'm speaking about, and she was able to do it. If you have a single woman today with a child trying to, match that, it wouldn't happen.
I know, and I'm not even sure why that happened, but I just want to figure out how do we get back on it.
Yeah, we got to do something to get back on track, because it's so unfair that some people work in 3 jobs and they still can't pay the bills. It's crazy to me. And also, you said you had a big, huge family there. How many? You had 8 siblings?
No, I have 5 siblings, okay. So six kids in the family, 4 older brothers and 1 younger sister.
Okay, so I was adding the parents, so that was 8.
So 8.
Yeah, so 8 altogether.
8 altogether.
And you all went on vacation, 8 of you.
Different times, yep. Different times,
Look at that.
I mean, my mom was having kids from the time she was 18 to 38. So there was kind of an age, there's a large age span. Not the siblings were all home at the same time.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah,
but,
yeah. Some
But,
were late bloomers and
late
some
bloomers,
were,
yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, so can you talk about your journey here at AM 950 that led to you ultimately working here, like your prior employment, and then what connected you to becoming
Sure. Happy to.
A part of the station? Yeah.
So I got a journalism degree, and I'm going to tie in a little bit to also growing up with my journalism degree, because I remember in 1968, my brother was in Vietnam, and I remember sitting around the TV and, saying, is Richard there? I always was impacted by the media and how the media affected lives. Unfortunately, my brother came back from Vietnam, but that how that television, how we share information, always was ingrained in me from that very young experience. So I got a journalism degree. I also did work. I did go to a radio station for high school, KBEM, which is now in North High School. But I went to that. It was like part-time. I'd go to high school part-time, and 3 hours, half the time I went to KBM. Got my degree in journalism, worked as a television reporter, and then I stumbled on Paul Wellstone's first campaign in 1990. I just kind of walked and just stumbled in on there, and it was such an incredible experience to be on that. I was like the fourth person hired, and I did all the grunt work for Paul Wellstone.
I hate to interrupt you about this because I'm a New Yorker. I moved to Minnesota in 2000. Mm-hmm. Can you just one little quip about, or little anecdote about Wellstone that motivated you, that got you involved with him? Because I don't really know very much about him except that he was an amazing progressive politician.
Well, I went to the state convention, and I just loved his speech. It was mesmerizing.
Okay.
It was, it just reached into the soul and the heart. He spoke in a way that was just enlivening.
It touched you.
It touched you. And remember, at that time, George Botchowitz was the $6 million man. Everyone thought there's no way you could win. And then this scrappy little guy with hardly any money wins in this incredible upset. And people may not remember what an upset that first victory was, but it was a total upset. Mm-hmm. But after working Paul Wellstone's campaign, I was active in another incredible upset, and that was David Minke's campaign in the 2nd District, which was a rural district, and Cal Ludeman was the person who was running. Everyone thought Cal was going to win, but David won. And then, those years, I was also active in a couple different things. I was a media consultant for what became Minnesota Care. At that time, it was called Health Rights. So we, in Minnesota, passed the first government-supported health care. It was Health Right, and that evolved into Minnesota Care. And believe it or not, in that time period, I also was hired by the Republican Party. The Republican Party chair and the Democratic chair got together to promote the caucuses. So we did around the state. We did this Caucus 92, and I did a little media consultant with the we got media consultant with the two parties working together to get people to show up to the caucuses.
Wow, bipartisanship.
Bipartisanship.
Who would have thunk it?
I know. It was kind of bizarre. I don't know if that could happen today, but it was actually fun. And because politics it doesn't have to be this killer sport that it's become. It's the way that we affect each other's lives. It's our policy. It's what happens to Social Security. It's what do we do on health care. What are our rules of the road?
I think Voldemort had a lot to do with that.
Voldemort?
If you people that listen to my show know,
okay.
I don't like to use his name too much, so I call him the name that shall not be mentioned from Harry Potter. Have you ever heard of Voldemort?
I did hear of Voldemort from Harry Potter. I was kind of confused there for a second, but I did hear about him, so I know that. I know his name, so we can.
I just wanted to inject some humor.
Cool.
So again, how did that connect to AM 950?
So another way it connected is. So I did. I was also a PR director at Girl Scout Council of St. Croix Valley for 5 years, and then I stayed home with my daughter, which was awesome. I gave birth to this beautiful being, and had the luxury of staying home. And while I was staying home, two things happened. One is the Iraq War happened, and at that time I was so knowledgeable about what was going on. I was like waking up at 3 a.m. and listening to the BBC, and none of that knowledge got in our media systems. I mean, free press is the cornerstone of democracy, and we're doing something like going to war, and all the stuff that that people were warning about it was all true, and the stories that we were told in our media was so wrong and so consequential, so much money and loss and stress with all those wars. And had we had a more vibrant, had we lived up to our principles of a living democracy and a free press, I think we would have a very different world right now. But anyhow, so that was one thing. And I just, so I did tune in to AM 950 right when it started. At that time, it was called Straight Talk Radio. It was on two little dials, and the Air America network just started, and they had an ad saying they needed salespeople. And so I just applied. I actually applied late, and I think I applied on a Friday and I started on a Monday. I mean, it was insanely fast.
Did you have any experience with sales, or this is your first
time?
No,
it was my first. It's my first time in sales.
They threw you to the wolves.
Well, we did have a lot of training. We did, and then that's what the first week. That's why it was so fast. Is because she wanted to Janet Robert. Who's worked so hard to get this station off the ground, and I personally saw her pull out I don't know if I want to say pull out the dead mice from the buildings. There's so many, there's just a lot of there's a lot of work that went into those early days.
It was a very grassroots radio station.
Oh, without a doubt.
It's not like one of those highfalutin stations.
Yeah, and I mean, I was also really aware of how important conservative talk was to Republican policy, and liberals don't have anything like that.
No,
we did not. We're still so much weaker than the conservative kind of message machine. And not that I think liberals need a message machine, but we need some place to share our voices.
Yeah, we even had TV shows that I can remember in the 90s that were right-wing oriented. And finally Air America, because I remember in New York, I wasn't in Minnesota yet at the time, and I remember listening to Air America and saying, "Wow, progressive radio! What a concept!"
Yeah,
yeah, and they had some great hosts. I think was it Rachel Maddow?
Yes, Rachel Maddow. She started on radio. In fact. I don't think Rachel Maddow. Well, there's no I think. I mean, Rachel Maddow's career grew out of the progressive talk radio station.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. And so basically, you did work for AM 950 from its inception.
Yep.
Wow, that's great. Can you explain for our audience what the job of new business development encompasses? And what are some of the duties of your job and things that you find challenging with the job? So
basically, I cold call for a living. And I'm really lucky because every time you say you cold call for a living, people are like, "Oh, that's got to be a really bad job." And I don't feel that way at all. And the reason I don't feel that cold calling is bad is because I'm animated by this living economics that I want to create, and that's what this radio station is about. And I think that's the aspiration of making a progressive future is a living democracy where we honor our water is life, but we're beings, not just things. It's not, and it's hard to talk about, but we don't have it. So, but having said that, my food show was sponsored by Seward Co-op. Love Seward Co-op. Love the story behind Seward Co-op. So when we're shopping at Seward Co-op, we are having agency over the economy. We're not just workers. We're not, but we're participants. And I don't know I wish I had a simpler way of talking about this, and maybe if I just keep talking about it better. But, I want an economy of trust. And so but my day job is to identify businesses and call them and set up meetings for AM 950 and what lies underneath that is living economics.
Mm-hmm. Now, let's talk a little bit about Food Freedom Radio now because that was something that spawned out of you were the business development.
That's my day job. That's what I get paid for. So Food Freedom Radio is kind of a passion project. And so Brent Olson of Renewing the Countryside had an early food show, which I loved, called Local Food Hero. And then Minneapolis Farmers Market had a fantastic show. And then they were going to leave after doing their show for 3 years. So 8 a.m. Saturdays was open for a food show. My personal moment with food was, I guess I'll tell this story. So my husband is a gardener. My grandfather was a gardener.
So is mine.
Yeah. My grandfather was a gardener. My mom didn't touch it, which I think there's a conspiracy behind that. We can get in that later. But I think there was a reason. There was a conspiracy. It's something, for some reason, we went from World War II, where we all had victory gardens, to where we were all making wonderful TV dinners. So there was some type of shift that went on there. But I wasn't raised with gardening, but my husband was. And so like the gooseberries in our yard track back 60, 70 years, So, I mean, so we have I've been practicing something called like permaculture for a long time. And I took I took an 8-month permaculture course, so I more understood the principles of it. And but it's been let me take another breath. I do believe that plants are sentient. And we're kind of raised with the idea that humans are alive and plants and dogs and everything else is not. Hence, we have nouns, people, person, place, or thing. So the rest of the world is a thing, and we're over here being people. Woo, woo, happy people. Those are things, And that's just a bad philosophy of life. It's a living world, and there's microbes in the soil, and it's so complex, and we can't, and it's so gardening is actually really grounding. And anyhow, you're going to get me running off. That's kind of like the way I do things. So it's the way my mother did things too. Sometimes it bugged me. But even so when the 2008 economic crisis hit, all of a sudden I was like, oh, what would happen if we didn't have any food anymore? And that actually scared me because I was thinking, what would happen if we didn't have any food? And I've known how, even without gardening we can't provide for ourselves. So I did help start a community garden. And so anyhow, I had some of that grassroots food experience. And the show, I met Karen Olson Johnson at an event, and just it sort of happened like this, where it was kind of like that bizarre whatever, like, oh, that show's leaving. I couldn't find another one. Well, maybe we should tape one. And so I taped one, and that one aired. And so that was, 11 years ago now. So
what would you, if you had to describe your show, what would be the essence of it? What would people, glean from listening to your show?
Well, I try to focus the show on shining the lights on the positives that's going on in our food system right now, and to try to help make those positives more common. And for instance, I had Forever Green at the University of Minnesota, and they've been working a long time on things like kernza, which are perennial grains. And when you have these perennial grains, you have it's water friendly, it's soil friendly, it's life friendly. It supports the pollinators, I think most of the people listening are probably aware, but even in today's newspaper, a story on the nitrates in our water. So our current food system is leaving nitrates in the water, incredible injustice issues. The people who work in the food system are among the lowest paid, and there's a huge concentration of wealth. You have 4 companies controlling 85% of the beef processing. You have the pesticide use, which is, I just want to call these big box stores cancer depots. Because it's just, we use 1 billion pounds of pesticides, and
You sound like my spouse. You really do, because he's got this thing against lawns.
Oh God, do I too?
Because Roundup is all
zombie
over.
yards, monoculture. Listen, like, oh, are you ashamed of your neighbors? Yeah, I know. Sorry, you talked about your husband.
He's with you. Why do you have lawns when you can have these beautiful gardens and grow crops and grow vegetables and fruit and raspberries? We have raspberries all over our yard. We're probably the only house. We live in suburbia,
Yeah.
And everybody's got a well-manicured lawn, and they always have the sprinklers on, and they're rounduping the whole thing, killing the weeds and da-da-da-da-da. And here we are with raised beds with all these beans growing and raspberries and other vegetables, and we look like a farm, But he says we need this stuff, Philip, because who knows what you're getting in a store when you buy vegetables, right?
Right, but without a doubt. And the other thing that I'm moving towards, because I'm past my 60 mark, is I want a retirement yard. And so here's my big tip for a retirement yard: hazelnuts. So the hazelnuts, we'll put some posters on there, but hazelnuts are beautiful. You just let the leaves fall. You don't have to pick the leaves up, and they just start spreading these little patches. And if you can go faster than the squirrel, you have to pick them before the squirrel does. you get some really good local foods, but they're wonderful instead of these the hedges. But let's take a moment, if I can, and just the stress that's behind that yard and how we are with each other, and that's like I see so many of these ads for cancer-causing monoculture yards that are unkind to water and soil and other life forms. And they often say, have this monoculture zombie yard because otherwise your neighbors will be ashamed of yourself. You can make your neighbors more, they're going to look up and they're going to be like, ooh, you're really hot. So does this make sense to you? I mean, what is this thinginization that we do? And because of the thinginization we do with each other, we just have all these negative consequences.
Yeah, yeah.
And it lives in me, too.
And our county actually has promoted rain gardens, which we have. My husband and you could sit for hours talking about this stuff because I'm an amateur when it comes to this stuff. I learned through him, but it's really beautiful what they do. It's like you have this little ditch kind of thing where the water accumulates, and you can grow perennials. You can grow lilies. You can, and it actually is prettier. Your front yard looks so much, in my opinion, prettier with flowers and things like that, as opposed to just this green lawn.
Well, and the irony is, most people, if they drove down my front yard, it doesn't. I mean, I do have a lot of trees. Like I have the hazelnut stand, and I have a peach tree in the front yard. That's always, it doesn't produce. I mean, the peach trees, it's a little kind of.
We tried that; it didn't work out.
It's kind of cold. We have to put a lot of leaves on it, and but hopefully, because the peaches are fantastic when we do get them. But we do have some flat-looking grass or stuff that looks like grass. We've never used chemicals on it. We don't. I mean, it's just whatever. I mean, it's and I think it looks fine. I mean, we do mow. I mean, we do mow in the front, and then we have a lot of the trees. And then in the back, it's all permaculture.
Yeah, we
it's
do
all
have. I
vegetables.
don't want to mislead. We do have some grass in the front lawn, but there was much more. But now with the rain garden, it took a little more space, and so there's more flowers and more blossoms and iris and just all these different flowers are so pretty.
Well, and that's, I mean, so natural lawns can be beautiful and enriching, and they're not eyesores. And I mean, I think there's sometimes people are afraid of that. But
why do people think that flowers in the front? Eyesore. I don't know.
Well, I don't know either.
Yeah, it's crazy. By the way, is Food Freedom Radio a call-in show, or do you have guests, or both?
Occasionally, it can be call-in. I used to always be live on Saturday, and then I realized I only had to come to work 4 days a week, so I tend to tape it now. I do pre-tape it. I'm also. Now I'm also broadcasting live on LinkedIn Live. So if somebody wants to participate with a particular guest, then it's also LinkedIn Live. But
thank you for that. Thank you.
Yeah. It's but I tend to pre-record it, and then it's more of an interview and just getting information out there.
And so when people call in, they what's like a typical call? Like what would they ask you?
Well, and this is, that's where I really see it. I really see Food Freedom Radio as more of a platform for others to speak. And so to learn about this, just to learn about what other people are doing. I'm going to give you another story. I love this. Tree range farming. So people may have heard of free-range chickens. Well, tree-range chickens is hazelnuts with chickens and elderberries. So it's a whole different economic market. It's a different way of looking at food. So the big box store approach to food has been resulting in a lot of consequences, environmental and human consequences. Because when we infect the environment, we impact ourselves, right?
Sure.
So this growing of this other system, and like Seward Co-op was one of the first places to carry tree range chickens, and now they're growing. And I was at a regenerative food conference in Chicago, and the guy spoke there, Ricky, who spoke there, and. He just lit up the place. I mean, he really did light up the place because it's something deeper and that's calling, I think, to us.
Yeah.
It's about a more loving, conscious, living way of being with the planet and each other.
Yes, and if you live in a small city, a small like town or whatever, it's easier to garden because you have more space. But like city dwellers, for example, I'm hearing a new thing called hydroponics. Have you heard of that?
Yeah.
Where you can do this in your garage, for God's sake. It's just crazy.
Yeah.
Could you explain very briefly about what hydroponics is? Isn't it about growing in water?
Yeah, so hydroponics is growing in water. And I know there's been a little bit of controversy, is that organic or not, and how you label it. And so you do have companies that are doing large-scale aquaponics. And globally, it's, really touted. I mean, if we can, obviously for growing food closer to where we live, that is better for the environment. We're not trucking it out. And I almost want to just take a breath right here and just remind people of what the food shed was like here in the Twin Cities when you and I were growing up in the 60s. It was very different. I mean, there were vegetables being grown in Egan, and that's what the people in Minneapolis were eating, right?
Egan was farms, yeah.
Egan was farms, and Brooklyn Park was potatoes, and the pumpkins were from Hopkins. And, so we had this wonderful local food shed in our area, which got dramatically altered, and now we almost think that all the food has to come from over there, whereas how do we bring it back into us? And certainly some of the innovations like indoor aquaponics and indoor farming and vertical farming is one way to bring that back, but also just incorporating it in our everyday lives. And I mean, this is complex, but everyone can do their own thing. I mean, I feel like sometimes I'm not the most articulate, but even having a little rosemary plant on your counter, and just taking a little swigs and having that own little contact of that rosemary when you're making your own food.
Yeah.
And
as an Italian, I can tell you, I grew up in New York City. The Italian capital of the United States, and my mom did not have a green thumb. We used to have potted plants. That's about it. But the one thing she did have was basil plants, because that's like our herb.
Right.
You put basil in almost everything in Italian cuisine. So you put it in your sauce, you put it on your salad, you put it here, there, and everywhere. And I grew up with that, so I know how to treat basil. It needs a lot of sun, needs to be hydrated on a regular basis. You can't keep it in the shade, or you got to put it right there. But I am learning through my spouse, like you said, rosemary, mint. What else do we grow that are herbs? Sage, things like that, which I had no idea how to grow.
Well, and it's where I feel like there's a relationship I have with my plants. I'm working a reciprocal, like when I'm protecting them from invaders. Some people might call that weeding. I don't. I just kind of call it. I'd like to save the things I love, not necessarily weed out the bad guys. But it's having that relationship with the more than human world.
Yeah.
That's cool.
So let's go to climate change, because I think that's really important. How does climate change affect the water, the soil, the planet, and people, which is the basis for what you talk about on Food Freedom Radio? Right.
And I almost want to side out because I'm going to go back to being the daughter of a truck driver in the 1930s truck driver strike, and that how the people here in Minneapolis, the truck drivers said, no, we want a better life for our kids in the future and ourselves right here, right now. So we're going to strike and we're going to make it. We're going to figure out how to make this world a better place. Climate and humans, we're connected. We're not separate, and we are connected, and the planet is screaming at us right now. And sometimes when people scream, I want to turn away. But one of the most powerful things to do is to just start listening to the planet and slowing ourselves down and making the world a better place. And the thing is, and aside from all the words, but living in a regenerative or living with the more than human life is actually a funner way to live. I mean, I think but then statistically, and I'm so glad there's so many people that are working on the climate issues, and let's just thank them and be grateful for their work. And these issues are complex, I was talking to someone who did this biochart, and she and I said, of course it's complex because it's whole. So, a primer on climate change. If you have plants with deep roots, that absorbs carbon from the air. So the deeper roots you have in your plants, good for the environment. So trees have deep roots, they're good for the environment. Perennial grains would have deep roots, they're good for the environment. Monoculture short zombie grass, not so good because it doesn't absorb the carbon. So if I'm having hazelnuts in my yard, those roots are deeper and it's more it's better climate change. Now, there are so many issues going on with the climate and again, so one of the other things if I could maybe share about that, I went to this thing that actually had people like Nestle and larger companies. And it was really nice to see people with very different viewpoints and orientations having a shared voice on this. Because that's how we're going to make real change. It's bottom up and top down is the way transformations work. So it's me planting hazelnuts and it's the larger companies taking responsibility and trying to figure out how to actually count what's going to make a difference. And it's trying to get us together. And I'm hopeful that we can. But it's not guaranteed.
No.
It's not guaranteed. And I think that's...
But again, climate change tends to be an issue on the left only. I mean, I don't really ever hear right wing. I'm biting my tongue here. Right-wing radio or television talking about it ever.
Can you? I can almost hear the people saying, "Oh, they said there was a big drought in the Southwest. Now they're talking about flooding." But it's like, how do we turn down all that drama?
Well, it's not even about flooding or drought. It's about extremes. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to be one way or the other. There are places in look at Minnesota. I mean, our temperature is, I remember when I first moved here, and I'm only here about 20-some-odd years. I landed in Minnesota in April, and there was about 12 inches of snow on the ground. Now that doesn't happen. We get rain, and it's not as extreme.
And you fly a lot, so have you flown over the United States and have witnessed how the geography has changed?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yes. And the turbulence, because climate change causes turbulence, and a lot more passengers are getting injured, flight attendants are getting injured. Climate change has a domino effect on everything, really. It's not just food, it's not just air, it's everything. And if we don't tackle this soon, our grandchildren, our children and grandchildren will not have a planet to speak of, really.
Yeah.
And I don't want to sound fatalistic, but that's basically what's going to happen,
Well, yeah, and the wind, it's getting windier, and you're right. That's tied to climate change, and the ocean is acidifying.
Yeah.
And then anxiety and depression are epidemic levels right now. So we have so much pain out there.
Yes. And to segue to the last question in this part of the show, can you talk a little bit of the concept of regenerative agriculture and briefly? Why is this concept so important for the future of our country and the world?
So it's there's not a clear definition of what regenerative means, and some people are afraid, and probably with good reason, to believe that the regenerative label could be just a kind of a watering down of organic standards. That's one of the fears. But I think there is also a lot of hope that regeneration, you know what it is when you see it, and you know what it is when it feels it, and it's and not having a strict definition. Tree range farms, regenerative. It's the law of return is something that people talk about. It's trying to look at the exact outcomes that we want. So we want healthy soil. What does healthy soil mean? It means it means it can hold this much carbon, and these again. The issues are complex. There is a bionutrient association, and there's some interesting work going on in knowing that human health and the health of the soil are really super connected. And so one of my guests was David Montgomery. He and his wife, Anne Bliquet, wrote a book, What Your Food Ate. And it's all about it's complex, our system. And we've simplified. Remember, 100 years ago, our dumb animal species knew nothing about vitamins. Well, we're just learning all these new about these phytochemicals and how the soil works and how the plants work and what makes things really healthy and well. So to get to, I don't have regenerative agriculture means X, Y, Z, but I know what regenerative agriculture means for me personally. It means that I have a relationship with my onions. That's what it means. It means my onions and I are a thing.
I love when you said what your food ate, because that is really important. Because if your food's not eating right, you're not eating right.
Well, exactly. And look at photos of Americans from 50 years ago to today. I mean, and for our lifespans have gone up, but for the first time, our diseases. Heart disease and juvenile diabetes was unheard of. So yeah, it's the food, the genetic modifications. I mean,
well, if my audience would just listen to your show, they'll learn all this and more.
Right.
So, and again, it's so great that you've been on the show here and talking about this. But now, ta-da!
Ta-da!
We have come to the part of the show I like to call the shift. Has an F in it. Don't forget. Otherwise, we'll have a problem. Where I shift the questioning away from your career and we direct it towards current affairs or what I like to call current events. So let's start with the first one. As of the taping of this show, the Supreme Court keeps the status quo in place for the availability of mifepristone for the time being. What are your thoughts about one Texas judge overruling the judgment of the FDA and the possibility that the court ultimately may agree with this judge and his ruling and, take that drug off the market for everyone?
Well, precedent. Each one of these Supreme Court people said they would honor precedents. I hope I'm saying that. They lied.
Let's just tell it like it is.
They lied. And I'm not a lawyer. I was going to say something silly and play, but I mean, it's that they went against this precedence is just so bizarre.
Well, Roe versus Wade was a double precedent because they had 72, and then in the 90s they buttressed it with another case. And now because Trump picked 3 judges, all of a sudden law doesn't mean what it used to mean, and shouldn't the law be by the book? And isn't the Constitution a fluid document? Because are we living back in the times when African Americans couldn't vote, women couldn't vote? It should be a fluid document. Don't you agree, Laura?
Well, I'm going to just kind of take a pause because I don't really know what you mean by fluid document.
Meaning that it moves with the times. In other words, like when we talk about the Second Amendment, for example, it's come to me now that everybody and their mother could have an AR-15. Where back in the day they had muskets and only the well-regulated militia, as it says in the Second Amendment, could have those weapons. That's what I mean by that. So we're moving with the times. It's a document that should be alive, not just stagnant. I guess.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, it's a living constitution and a living democracy, and a lot of people talk about that in really wonderful ways. And we get to issues, and I'm sure for a lot of us in our 60s, sounds like, what? I mean, this was just the law of the land for decades, and I don't even want. Often we get into the. It seems like the dominant story is always the storytelling. This could be good for Democrats. This could be bad. And I'm like, I'm so tired of that churn.
Please,
it's just like.
Thank you.
No, a democracy is us doing things together. And
isn't it for the benefit of everybody, whether you have an R after your name or a D? I mean, what the heck is the difference? I mean, we're trying to make this a better country. And include everybody, and like you said, we're talking about climate change, and there are so many issues that. Because I cannot remember kids. Because when I was growing up, and when you were growing up, I'm going to
we're both the same age. About
the only thing we used to do were fire drills in school. That was the drama that we had.
Fire drills.
Now they have these live shooter drills where they have to hide under the desk, and if he's coming in this door, you do that. If he's coming in that window, you do that, and children shouldn't have to go through that.
No should adults. No should we. I mean,
Nobody.
no one should have to go through that.
Yeah, you can't even go to the movies. I mean, it's awful. Anyway, so I'm going to segue to that question. Would you agree with me that people are too willing to shoot first and ask questions later in this country? People can't even ring a doorbell, the wrong doorbell. They can't drive up the wrong driveway. People can't, do anything by mistake anymore, because then somebody's just going to say, "Oh, take their gun out and shoot them." So, what's your opinion about that?
I think I dream of a well culture, and clearly our culture is not well right now. And part of that anger, I think, has been actually fomented, because when you have angry people, they'll give you money. They'll make everyone mad. They're going to give you money. It's like, oh yeah. Or you make people mad. They might vote for you, and you make enemies, and they're all good. But we have this churn culture.
When Donald Trump got indicted, he raised more money that way because people got angry.
Actually, I'm the victim, and so whatever this. But I think let's just mourn for a second, and I also. I was very grateful that I stumbled on something called nonviolent communication a long time ago. So I actually took several seminars with Marshall Rosenberg, who's not alive anymore. But the basic of nonviolent communication is that I have at any one moment I can choose to blame and shame, or I can connect. And the first thing is to connect with ourselves, and then be able to connect with somebody else. So even we're in polarized times, and so it's almost reactive is common, and I want to say they're the bad guys, look at all that, but I just don't want this living in the culture. I know it lives, and so what do we do about it? And I think we got to find a way of bringing the temperature down, and the number one thing to bring the temperature down is to connect with ourselves, right? And and how do we feel with all these shootings? And I know both, and I don't know if we want to segue into this and that, because both of us have been victims of crime. And so,
Absolutely.
And,
well, I've talked about it on my show. I lost my father when I was about to reach my 5th birthday. I remember the trauma in my mother's face. Even though I was that young, it was etched in my brain, because it happened in the middle of the night that the cops came and told her. And the man had a gun. He obtained it illegally, and my father was friends with this woman, and they were friends. And this man was married to this woman. No longer. He wanted to see her, so he came over to the house that day to talk to her. He's still trying to get back with her, as from what I gleaned from my relatives talking to me about it. And my dad was in the wrong place at the wrong time. But again, if guns were difficult to obtain, maybe I'd still have my dad. Maybe I'd have more siblings, and my mother wouldn't have had sleepless nights and trauma in her life, because she had a lot of trauma in her life too. But that's another show. But and if you want to share your experience, we could do that.
Sure, and but I can tell. But you are also resilient. You didn't take that. I like the Beatles songs. Hey Jude, take a sad song and make it better. I mean, despite all that trauma, your mom raised you and loved you, and I don't want to say life is good, but could I say life is good?
She unfortunately married another man after my dad died that was abusive to her and me. So, so it was compounded with that. But she still was an amazing woman. She made me the person I am. I mean, I could have turned out to be a drug addict, a murderer, or something, some antisocial person. But here I am. I'm the most gentle person I know. I don't believe in violence. I don't even fight with people. I walk away from conflict. I gained my who I am from my mom, and gay boys. They always say the gay boys and their moms. There's no closer two people in the world.
Well, okay. So my brother, who was the gay boy in our family, he was bisexual. And so he took my mom on a trip every frigging year. For like 20 years, he would take my mom, and he even took my mom to Italy once, and he was. My mom and him were best friends, and he was driving, and someone pulled over on the road and looked like they needed help, and that person was someone who had a major mental health crisis, and my brother was the third person killed by that guy who's got charged, but my brother was murdered by a stranger.
Was he already incarcerated, or they didn't catch the guy?
So no, I'm not going to say his name because I don't want to say his name, but his life story is that he had spent most of his life in jail, and he'd spent 20, 30 years, and he got out in maybe 1 or 2 years and seemed like he was doing okay. Then something happened, like he lost his phone, and he went crazy, and he murdered 3 strangers in a 3-week period. And, I know. And so, but to try to get, but this is, so all these violent stories, I mean, and I know.
But I hate to interrupt you, but I can remember, and I'm sure you do, that the government at one period in time had government-owned mental institutions.
Exactly.
The government paid for it to get these people off the street, give them help, even though they were, held against their will, but they were given medications. They were being seen by doctors who was specialized in these mental illnesses. A lot of people were psychotic, manic depressive. I mean, whatever it was that caused them to act out, they had help. Now there's no help for these people, and they're on the street, and they're acting. This is their way of acting out, and without that help,
right.
Do you follow?
Oh, without a doubt. And Marshall Rosenberg has a great quote. I may not say it right, but violence is it's a way of getting your needs met. It's not a kind way of getting your needs met, but it's a way you have these needs that are not being met.
Yeah, the copycat
killings. And I think a lot of a lot of the school shootings, a lot of that copycat needs shootings that we're witnessing on a daily basis. It's almost It's also that the society puts so much pressure on people to be things rather than beings. I mean, and I want to be famous. Okay, I'm not going to be a basketball star. I'm not going to be a singer. Oh, I guess I can be a shooter. That's one way I can be famous. No one's paying attention to me, but there's so how do we take that sad song and make it better? And and I without a doubt, what happened under Reagan in the 1980s with closing all the mental health facilities, that had an impact. And we need to have something.
That's the man.
That's the Ronald Reagan, and that's
that's what he did.
And you know what? I can tie this to the beginning. Ronald Reagan, and my dad voted for Ronald Reagan. He was a Reagan Democrat. Now, when I was younger, he was a big Teamster Democrat, and he was like, "Well, I remember the difference between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party is that the Democrats are for those little guys." But as a truck driver, he listened to that talk radio, and and so they kind of knew. That was.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I don't want to talk about him anymore because I did a whole show, talked about him on one of my shows. He was the reason why AIDS was never talked about because he did not discuss it until maybe his second term. And all these people were dying, and it was not talked about because they were gay men, and we get rid of them, and that's why I have no love lost between him and I, so as of the taping of the show as well, Fox has announced the parting of ways with Tucker Carlson and Dan Bongino, I believe his name is pronounced, and CNN fired Don Lemon. What do you think about these moves briefly, by Fox and CNN?
Well, so my take a little bit on it, my take is that we have so much media consolidation in our country right now. And again, democracy, the First Amendment is free press. Who pays for the free press? And so you have billionaires like Murdoch, and there's a lot behind them, and there's a lot of reasons they want to own and control policy, and they think that their ideas are number one and that other ideas do not count, or other people do not count. And so they have an outweighed impact on our society. And one of the ways that I feel my job is to balance the economy is to bring advertisers to AM 950. And we grow our own economy based on our agency. We buy and sell from each other. That is an anti-fragile economic system. So when we get to these people who, for whatever reason, get a lot of fame and stardom, and I actually haven't listened to them. I mean, I just caught little clips here and there, and I have
no desire either.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, okay, well, that's it. And I know, I mean, I actually had a friend that named their dog after him or something like that, and
Tucker?
loves him. Oh, yeah.
Carlson?
I don't, Tucker, whatever. I mean, it's just crazy for him. Loved him.
Joy Reid calls him Tuckums.
Well, but I do think that that some of those media personalities can really speak in an animated way that people listen to, but I think they're also kind of they're going for our lower nature rather than our higher nature. They're kind of like, here's the person to be mad at. And this is probably trends. I know you want to ask about transgendered. And so, yeah, here's the new victim. These are the bad guy, or these are the, so there's some way that they play with.
Mm-hmm. I think also with the Don Lemon thing, because he's the left version of Tucker Carlson. He was a gay black man, and very easily expendable. I hate to sound like I'm a victim as a gay because I don't feel like I'm a victim. I don't play the victim card, but I just feel it's so much easier to get rid of someone who is marginalized than it is to get rid of somebody. I mean, the only reason I think Tucker is gone is because they have all these lawsuits coming up now. They have a producer who's suing them coming up, and another, I think Smartmatic is going to sue them. That's another voting machine company other than Dominion. So they got a lot of lawsuits. They just want to get him out of the way because he's just going to make them look even worse. And maybe they're going to have to pay more money out because they already paid they already had to pay out almost $1 billion, $780 million.
And I mean, I'm glad that verdict was. So there's an important nuance here.
Well, it wasn't a verdict, though. It was a settlement.
A settlement. Thank you for catching. I'm glad there was that settlement, and I'm glad they're paying the price. But I also think it's just sad that we can even have a president, someone in position that is also just touting lies like that, And
oh yeah. Anyway, let's talk about you and I. He's so cute.
It's your husband. I got to go garden with them, right? I can change.
No, you and I connected many years ago, and you had asked me to help volunteer for AM 950 at Minneapolis Pride. You remember that we discussed that already. How important is Pride this year in light of all of the anti-gay and anti-trans rhetoric from the right? And as a follow-up to that, what are your thoughts about Bud Light firing Dylan Mulvaney after the pushback against her being a trans woman representing a major brand? Let's start with the first part. The anti-gay and anti-trans stuff that's happening.
I'm surprised I want to go here, but I do want to go here. So I was actually active in the marriage rights, the fight for marriage rights, and I remember
Thank you for that, by the way.
Yeah,
allies.
Thank you.
I love the allies.
And I remember going and being in Lakeville and talking to people. I can remember one particular conversation. It's like, yeah, well, my brother's gay, but I still don't think there should be gay marriage. I'm like, well, why is that? And all of a sudden, there was that moment where it's like the light bulb lit. And it's like, I kind of don't know why, So in Minnesota, again, yay to us. We passed the marriage right to marry. And I remember...
we passed it before it actually passed nationally.
Yeah, we did. We did. And I remember even in liberal circles, it's like, okay, I agree on, maybe we shouldn't do marriage. That might scare them too much. Instead of do civil rights, there was that kind of conversations were common in the 80s and the 90s. So what I loved about that marriage right is how it really became grounded on love. Because I know before they were like, we're not going to show people of guys kissing because that might intimidate people too much. And on marriage rights, they said, heck no, we're going to show our love. This is going to be a fight for love.
And I hate to interrupt you again, but yes, what you just said, you hit it on the nail on the head. Gay people tend to be the least into public displays of affection, kissing and hugging in public. And how often do you see that? You don't, because we know we don't want negative reactions. We don't want to be, have to deal with maybe somebody pulling a gun out or beating us up or whatever the case may be, because not that everybody would do that, but we just don't want to take the chance. Sure. We tend to be more private in that respect. And what you just said makes a lot of sense, because even on TV, like when there's movies or something like that, where they have one kiss, and then it's not like a make-out kiss, it's more like a, which doesn't. People do, gay couples do that, but you do kiss more passionately. That will never happen on TV because of people writing letters, and that's gross, and I don't want my children to see that. And that's where the gay, the anti-gay laws in Florida come from, the Don't Say Gay bills and the anti-trans bills in Florida. So do you want to expand on that a little bit?
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess the right word is scapegoating, but especially transgendered and how that has become a motivating issue for some people.
Yeah, it used to be us they picked on. Now they're picking on. There's got to be somebody you always got to pick on. And to end this particular question, I just want to say personally, I want to thank you, because you are an ally, and you actually reached out to me. And you were very involved in the Pride, organization of AM 950, getting everything together and having the booth and having people man the booth and talking to people about Pride, LGBTQ issues. So thank you, Laura, on my personal behalf. You're welcome.
And this quote from Paul Wellstone cannot be said enough. We all do better when we all do better. And we talk about an inclusive community. It's obviously there ethnic communities, but it's also I want to have another way of saying this, but it's it's just having a place of belonging, of real belonging.
I don't know who said this. Maybe you would know. First they came for me, and I didn't say anything. No. First they came for you, and I didn't say anything. And then they came for somebody else, and I didn't say anything. Then they came for me.
Right.
I don't know who said that. It's a beautiful quote, but it's right, because when you attack one group, who knows if you'll be next. We all have to stick together as Americans, as a group of people, as a community, and allies like you. You're not part of the LGBTQ plus community, but you care, and that's wonderful. It shows a lot about your character, because a lot of people don't get involved because they don't belong to that community. They only care about their own community. And I care about all communities, like you do. Like I'd be the first. I was actually at the George Floyd protest, and I am not a African American person, but I think what happened to that man is indefensible. I mean, it was awful. I watched it on TV, and I literally was pouring tears out of my eyes to see the humanity of that man leaving him, and people are screaming, "Get your your knee off of him. He can't breathe." Then the EMT saying, "I'm an EMT. Let me just check his pulse," and da-da-da. So, yes, we all have to be allies for each other. And that's a great lesson, Right. It sounds Pollyanna, but we have to do it.
We have to do it. And your marriage doesn't weaken my marriage. It strengthens it, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, it really does strengthen it. And how we have this, and that's where I would love to kind of maybe even leave on is, where is the progressive vision? And that we want, and we can all. Everyone does better when everyone does better. An inclusive world, a healthy world, a sustainable world, and a joyful world.
Absolutely,
yeah.
And I this last question I usually ask on all my shows, but now it was already announced today that President Biden's going to run again for president. So, We know he'll probably be the nominee, but do you have any opinions on who the Republicans are going to end up choosing?
For a political talk station. Yeah, why not? Yeah, go for it. This is one thing I can remember. I'm going to say, I'm so tired of politics, all the ads, all the politics, and it gets to be exasperating and bummer, and that's not democracy. Democracy is living, and I want to feel excited about the candidate. And I'm actually, and I really want to tune down the drama. So I'm kind of gonna wait. And hopefully, if I think Biden is a calm presence.
He's a good man.
Yeah, he's a good man. He's a calm presence, and maybe he will be the best choice. I don't know.
I hope so.
I hope so, and I hope that we can have unity. Though I really do hope we can find that unified voice and that unified heart and soul, and have the energy to make it better. And there's so many critical issues, and healthcare, environment, justice, and gun rights, and
all that stuff.
All that stuff, yeah.
Before we end the show, Laura, is there anything you want to, that I haven't brought up that you want to talk about? You want to read something?
Yeah, maybe I will. I'm actually starting to come out as a poet. I'm putting some of my poems out on Edge magazine, so you can read some of those. And when I do write poems, it's totally inspirational, and I write them in less than 2 minutes. But here's one called Static Belonging Poem. Mm-hmm. Not living but frozen, like a spaghetti stain on a wall, dripping of anger expressed because the anger was frozen, static being stuck in whispers of that is this, how to express the vibrant moving center that are thou, no static memberships, no static measurements, just knowing.
Oh wow, very very profound.
Yeah,
really,
well,
really nice.
And that's where the conversation about living democracy on a living planet with living people, and we're all doing our best, and how do we move something forward that's kinder, that's healthier, and that's more gentle and more loving.
Yep.
Transform that fear to love.
The message of this show, if anything else, if I ever get anything out there, the message of this show is that we have to look out for each other.
Yeah.
Basically.
Right.
That's what it is. That's what it's all about. We are the world. We are the children. Remember that song?
Right. I do.
Anyway, unfortunately, Laura, we've come to the end of the show, but I want to thank you so much for coming on. For more information about Laura Hedlund and Food Freedom Radio, you can follow her on LinkedIn.
Yeah, LinkedIn is the best now because
Laura Hedlund, right?
And I've slowed down on all my other social media. I actually deleted them from the phone, so I don't do those other ones. I mean, I do have a Facebook page for that, but I find that on LinkedIn, because it's tied to it's public, it's not anonymous, and it's tied to your professional background, that you can actually connect with people if you need to. And I hope it's a good one. But I'm doing my show on LinkedIn now. But anyone who wants to, just reach out to me via LinkedIn.
Thank you for that. And to our listeners, I'd like to thank you all for spending time with us today. And please stay tuned for more of the Downright Upright Show in the future. This is your host, Philip Anthony, saying ciao for now. And again, thank you, Laura.
Thank you. Thank you, Philip.